Imagine, right now, wherever you are listening to this, trying to simply stand up from a chair.
Okay.
But before you do, you have to strap a physical weight to your body. And we're not talking about like a heavy backpack or a weighted training vest.
Right. Nothing like that.
No. Imagine strapping a weight to your leg that is literally more than double your entire body weight.
I mean, you wouldn't even be able to take a single step without your muscles just completely screaming.
Exactly.
The sheer biomechanical effort required just to keep yourself upright would drain your energy reserves in minutes.
And you aren't just doing this for a quick, brutal workout, You carry this weight all day, every single day, for over a decade.
Wow.
Starting from when you were just a toddler, literally just learning how to walk. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Ah.
You are carrying that hypothetical weight in your mind right now because today we are trying to understand the absolute limits of human endurance.
It really is about endurance, yeah.
We're looking at a deeply personal, remarkably profound document titled Jasmine Devotion.docs. It's a text surrounding a 14-year-old girl named Jasmine Ramirez from Bradenton, Florida, and her staggering physical reality.
The author of this devotion takes a really hard look at human suffering here.
Yeah, they force us to ask a massive question like, is it possible that the heaviest, most inexplicable burdens we carry are actually miracles in disguise?
Which is such a heavy concept. The author uses Jasmine's medical anomaly to basically build a framework for survival.
Right.
It is an exploration of how we make sense of pain that seems entirely senseless. Attempting to reframe extreme suffering as a story of highly specific purpose.
But before we can even touch the philosophical or religious framing the author uses, we absolutely have to establish the physical baseline. The document doesn't shy away from the medical reality at all.
No, it is incredibly detailed.
Because starting at age 2, Jasmine's left leg began growing abnormally. And when we say abnormally, we are talking about a medical disorder so rare that it doesn't even have a formal name.
Doctors were just completely baffled by what they were seeing.
Completely. The arteries, the veins, the fat, and the bone in that left leg just began expanding at an entirely unnatural rate.
The physiology of what was happening there is just astounding. I mean, the human heart is a pump designed for a very specific volume of tissue.
Right. It has a limit.
Exactly. When one limb begins to expand relentlessly for 12 years, that heart has to work overtime, forcing blood through an ever-growing, chaotic network of new veins and arteries.
The metabolic toll on a growing child's body would be, well, it would be immense.
Absolutely immense.
It was a relentless expansion. And this went on for 12 long years until 2025, when her health took a really devastating turn. Jasmine developed a severe infection in that leg.
Which changes everything.
It really did. The medical team was pushed into a corner, facing a literal life or death decision. They determined that her only real chance for survival was a massive amputation.
And a standard amputation is complex enough, but dealing with an unnamed, highly vascularized disorder turns it into a surgical marathon. The text notes this was a nearly 17-hour procedure. The surgeons had to meticulously navigate this incredibly dangerous landscape of blood vessels just to remove the limb and save her life.
And here is where the math of the situation just completely boggles the mind. The leg they removed weighed 174 pounds.
Just let that number really sink in for a second. 174 pounds.
Post-surgery, Jasmine herself weighed only about 80 pounds.
Wow.
So to give you listening a sense of proportion, this is literally like a child having to carry a full-grown adult male strapped to their leg every single day of their life.
It's almost unimaginable.
Think about the social and emotional toll of that. The physical exhaustion of simply existing, trying to get out of bed, trying to navigate a crowded school hallway.
And we haven't even touched on the psychological weight.
No, not at all.
The stares of strangers when you were a kid just trying to go about your normal life, constantly feeling the eyes of the world on the very thing causing you so much agony.
The author of the devotion grounds the entire narrative in that visceral, undeniable extreme.
Right, because if a writer is going to talk to you about emotional or spiritual burdens, they need a scale that validates the concept of carrying the impossible.
Exactly. By detailing the literal 174 pounds Jasmine carried, the text ensures the reader cannot brush off the subsequent metaphor as some cheap, feel-good platitude.
It anchors the abstract theology in a brutal, undeniable physical reality.
Because you can't carry a 174-pound leg with just physical strength. At some point, the body simply fails unless the mind finds a profound reason to keep lifting it.
And that psychological survival tactic is where the author brings in a remarkably unexpected historical parallel.
Right. They don't lean into modern medicine or psychology to explain the why behind Jasmine's
Yeah.
condition.
No, the text pivots entirely to an ancient biblical analogy from the Gospel of Matthew.
The narrative shift is so striking. We move from a sterile modern surgical theater in Florida straight to the shores of a lake in the ancient world.
Specifically, Matthew chapter 17, verse 27.
The author zooms in on a very peculiar story here. Jesus and his disciples are faced with a demand from the temple tax collectors. They need to pay up.
Right.
But instead of just conjuring gold, Jesus gives his disciple Peter a highly specific instruction. He tells Peter to go to the lake, throw out a line, and open the mouth of the very first fish he catches.
And inside that fish, Peter will find a 4 drachma coin.
Exactly, which happens to be the exact amount needed to pay the tax. But what I found fascinating is how the devotion focuses entirely on the perspective of the fish.
Yeah, the text forces the reader to consider the physics and the daily reality of that animal. A fish with a heavy metal coin wedged in its mouth did not ask for that burden.
Not at all.
That coin would have severely impacted its ability to draw oxygen through its gills. It would have created massive eating challenges, likely altering its buoyancy and its ability to swim naturally.
It probably alienated it from the entire school of fish, too. You can imagine the other fish looking at it, instinctively avoiding the ones struggling with this bizarre, heavy object in its mouth.
Yeah, completely isolated.
The devotion argues that out of billions of fish in the world, this specific one was chosen to carry a burden that made its daily life incredibly difficult.
But because it carried that unasked for weight, it became the exact vehicle needed for a historical miracle, one that has been read about by billions of people for over 2,000 years.
The fish was swimming at a specific depth, in a specific lake, carrying a burden no one else could understand.
Purely to be there at the exact right second to meet Peter's hook. And the author maps that ancient aquatic reality directly onto Jasmine's 174-pound leg.
Hold on, though. We need to be careful here because looking at this impartially, I have to push back on the implications of that metaphor.
Okay, let's hear it.
It is one thing for an adult to look back at a difficult time in their life and find meaning in the struggle. But the text seems to be actively arguing that a 14-year-old girl's massive medical deformity wasn't a biological mistake.
But a deliberate, divine assignment.
Right. Framing a child's brutal, decade-long physical agony as a chosen honor feels incredibly heavy. It almost borders on romanticizing a tragedy. How does the author justify that leap?
That tension is the beating heart of the entire document. You are highlighting the exact friction the author wants the reader to confront.
Okay.
The central thesis of the devotion is basically, God does not waste weight. The author isn't trying to minimize the agony or romanticize the tumor.
They're providing a coping mechanism.
Yes, providing a cognitive mechanism for survival. When a burden is perceived as entirely random, the human brain processes it as chaotic cruelty. That leads straight to despair, because there is no narrative to hold on to.
So by framing it as an assignment, it changes the internal narrative.
It literally alters the psychology of trauma. If you view the pain not as random victimhood, but as a highly specific tool assigned to you because you have the unique strength to carry it, you activate the meaning-making centers of the brain.
And it's meant to eventually meet an urgent need for someone else.
Exactly. The devotion argues that the suffering is given a world-changing purpose. It shifts the entire experience from, why is the universe punishing me, to who am I being prepared to save?
Wow. Well, if the author's thesis is that carrying a massive burden is ultimately meant to become a message of survival for others, we have to look at how Jasmine actually delivered that message.
Right, because the document makes it very clear that waking up without the 174-pound leg did not instantly solve all her problems.
No, waking up lighter brought its own intense trauma.
The psychological whiplash of amputation is profound. For 12 years, her brain had mapped her body with that massive weight.
Her center of gravity, her spatial awareness.
Her entire physical identity was tied to it. The document is bracingly honest about her emotional aftermath following the 17-hour surgery.
She struggled deeply. Jasmine actually stated that she felt like a monster. She reached a point where she couldn't even bring herself to look at her own body.
It's heartbreaking.
Think about being a teenager, you know? A time when everyone is already hyper-aware of how they look, and suddenly waking up to a radically altered physical form.
It is a completely understandable response to such radical bodily trauma.
Yeah.
She had to mourn the loss of the limb while simultaneously relearning how to exist in a body she didn't recognize.
But the devotion tracks a crucial tectonic mental shift during her recovery.
She moves through the grief and reaches a point of absolute psychological steel.
She really does. She makes this conscious, incredibly powerful decision. Jasmine declares that people can point at her, they can stare at her all they want, and she simply is not going to care anymore.
That is the voice of someone who has been completely forged in fire.
And that internal shift sets the stage for a massive, very public moment of triumph. Just months, literally months after a near-fatal 17-hour surgery, Jasmine walks across the stage at her middle school graduation on one leg.
Imagine the sheer willpower required to coordinate that walk. The devotion highlights a powerful quote from Jasmine about that specific moment.
What did she say?
She said, "To be honest, I thought I wasn't going to make it, but I did. I got to walk the stage."
I thought I wasn't going to make it, but I did. Think about how many millions of people sitting in hospital rooms or dealing with silent tragedies need to hear those exact words.
Especially from someone who actually lived them.
But the devotion doesn't just stop at Jasmine's personal resilience, you know. It layers in another massive concept regarding how she even got to that stage. It involves her medical network, specifically a doctor named Peter Armstrong.
The narrative zooms out here to look at the macro-level connections that made her recovery possible.
The text highlights what it calls a miracle of timing. Years and years before Jasmine's condition ever reached that critical life-or-death crisis, Dr. Peter Armstrong became the chief medical officer of Shriners Hospital.
Okay.
Fast forward decades later, and he is now medical officer emeritus. And in that specific role, at that specific time, he is perfectly positioned to refer Jasmine's father, Manny Ramirez, for the proper prosthetic leg she desperately needed.
It's fascinating how the author views time like an intricate clockwork.
They are painting a picture where Dr. Armstrong isn't just a medical professional. He is a gear that started turning decades ago, specifically placed so his teeth would interlock with Manny and Jasmine's story at the exact second they arrived on the scene.
The parallel to the ancient text is completely seamless here. The devotion points out that the fish wasn't just swimming aimlessly, right? It was navigating the currents to be at the exact coordinates to meet Peter's hook. Similarly, Dr. Armstrong's entire career trajectory and Manny Ramirez's desperate search for help were perfectly synchronized.
The author uses this web of connections to reinforce the theology that none of the suffering was accidental.
Exactly. The surgeon was positioned years in advance, waiting for the moment Jasmine's burden became the catalyst for a miracle.
So she survives the surgery, she walks the graduation stage, the gears of synchronicity provide the prosthetic. But Jasmine didn't just survive and quietly fade into a normal life.
No, she actively collaborated to immortalize her experience so that anyone, anywhere, could lean on her story.
The devotion actually culminates in a creative piece designed explicitly to be shared outward.
Yeah, the author of the devotion and Jasmine co-wrote a song. It transforms the private, agonizing medical struggle into a public anthem.
The song is titled "When the Wait Becomes a Miracle," with the subtitle Jasmine's Song. The lyrics really tie the entire philosophy of the document together beautifully.
What do the lyrics say?
The opening verse paints the picture we started with. There was a girl with a burden to bear, more than her shoulders were meant to wear. It acknowledges the 12 long years of questions and the physical pain.
Which is so important to validate.
And then it directly loops in the biblical framework we discussed with the line, like, the fish with the coin in the sea, chosen for a purpose nobody could see.
Through music, the complex theology of trauma reframing is distilled into something a person can hum when they are feeling entirely overwhelmed.
It makes the abstract concept of purposeful suffering highly accessible. But the bridge of the song is what really stopped me in my tracks. It features Jasmine's own words. After carrying 174 extra pounds for a decade, after a 17-hour surgery, after feeling like a monster, she makes this profound, audacious declaration. She says, "I still have a long way to live."
Wow. The incredible resilience of a 14-year-old girl claiming her future like that is staggering.
And for you listening, this isn't just a static story from the past. You can actually follow her ongoing journey. The text mentions she shares her life and recovery on her Facebook page, which is @Jasmine'sJourney.
The inclusion of her ongoing public presence brings us to the ultimate application of the devotion. The document does not just want the reader to be a passive observer feeling inspired by a brave teenager.
It issues a direct call to action.
It forces the reader to look inward and identify their own 174 pounds.
And the text readily acknowledges that your burden probably isn't a massive physical tumor. Your 174 pounds might be completely invisible to the people around you.
It could be a sudden, terrifying medical diagnosis.
It might be the suffocating grief of losing someone you love. It could be an addiction you fight every single morning, a terrifying housing situation, or just a really difficult, dark season of life that has lasted way longer than you ever expected.
The psychological payoff of this entire document is the concept of granting permission to survive.
Yeah.
The author is suggesting that when you manage to carry your own crushing weight without letting it destroy you, your survival is no longer just about you. It becomes the tangible proof that someone else needs.
The text posits that a burden, when carried well, blooms into a rose.
Your ability to simply wake up and keep going becomes the exact word of life that a stranger on the other side of the world desperately needs to hear.
So let's trace this whole incredible arc back to where we began. We started with a visceral, unnameable medical disorder that resulted in a toddler slowly growing a 174-pound leg. We explored how this devotion takes that agonizing, daily, physical reality and radically reframes it through the lens of an ancient story about a fish carrying a heavy coin.
It suggests a deeply controversial but powerful idea that her pain wasn't a biological mistake, but a deliberately assigned weight meant to activate a miracle.
We followed her psychological journey from the dark, dysmorphic aftermath of a massive amputation to the incredible triumph of walking across her middle school graduation stage on one leg.
And finally, we saw how that private victory was transformed into a globally shared message of resilience through a co-written song.
The core takeaway from this deep dive is the life-altering power of how we frame our heaviest, most inexplicable burdens.
It challenges us to take our deepest pains and transform them from senseless personal tragedies into highly specific tools that might actually unlock someone else's future.
Which leaves us with a fascinating final thought to consider as we wrap up.
The devotion suggests the fish was chosen to carry the coin for Peter, and Jasmine was chosen to carry her condition so her graduation walk could inspire others in her community.
Yeah.
If our deepest, most painful struggles are actually intricate, highly specific tools meant to help someone else down the line, what if the person you are meant to help with your current burden hasn't even been born yet?
Oh, wow.
How does shifting your pain from a personal tragedy into a future inheritance for a total stranger change the way you wake up tomorrow morning?
Imagine, right now, wherever you are listening, trying to stand up with that massive weight strapped to your life. The exhaustion is real. The unfairness is real.
Absolutely.
But now, imagine someone else, years from now, sees the way you carried it. And suddenly, because of you, they realize they have the strength to carry theirs too.